Welcome aboard Rocket Ship, the platform with the most relevant content for competitive examinations. This is Rocket Ship IAS Lab and continuing with our series on answer writing for general studies papers of civil service main examination. We take up a question that you might encounter in GS paper 2. Let us read out the question carefully. With the ascent of dictatorial powers, democracies face a challenge more formidable than ever. Explain. What, in your opinion, should be the response of democratic nations to this emerging challenge? Even before we start attempting the question to write answer to this question, let us ask why this question at all. The thing is, UPSC rarely asks questions that where they would point finger at a particular country in the geopolitical context. But let us recall that as recently as 2021, UPSC has specifically asked about the rise of China, that is ascendance of China, and its impacts on US and its allies. So we can expect similar kinds of questions, and here we are talking in general terms about the rise of autocracies. We are not even naming names. With that, as you can see, the question has two parts as usual. In the first part, you have to talk about how the present day rise of autocratic or dictatorial powers is different in the sense that the challenge they pose to democracies is more formidable than ever. In this second part, you have to talk about what, in your opinion, should be the response of democracies to this emerging challenge. We are introducing our answer with a piece of information that should raise alarm among the democratic countries, among the citizens of the democratic nations. That is, the Communist Party-led, single-party governed China surpassed the GDP of USA in 2014. We are obviously talking in triple P terms, that is on purchasing power parity terms, that China surpassed United States of America way back in 2014. This is the first time since the rise of democratic politics, that is around 1800 to 1950s, that an autocratic regime can claim the pole position in GDP race. So the point is, today the autocratic nations can say that they have the same economic resources as the democratic nations. Now, even if it were to be delayed by the coronavirus pandemic of 2020 to 22, most commentators believe that it is inevitable, that it is almost a fait accompli, that it is almost an accomplished fact that China would surpass US GDP even on nominal terms by the year 2030. 40, that is in the third decade of this century, China would have surpassed the GDP of United States of America, and it would probably maintain that position for the rest of the 21st century. Again, taking the example of Russia, while it's a complex issue with all the parties sharing blame, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has demonstrated the relative weakness of the democratic Europe. Autocracies have even reinforced the alliance by co-opting disgruntled powers like Iran and bought out the loyalties of client states like Pakistan. So the thing is, the autocracies are strengthening the alliance by bringing, you could say, disaffected or disgruntled powers like Iran and the basket cases like the renegade province Pakistan. All this is sufficient to conclude that the challenges posed by autocracies today is more formidable, much more than one posed by fascism and even the Cold War era ideological divide. You can understand that Cold War was in essence an ideological divide between democracy and communism actually. The parties represented by United States of America and USSR, they were led by these two parties respectively. Today's autocratic powers have greater resources economic and demographic at their disposal. You certainly know that till recently China was the largest, the country with largest population, the most populous country on the earth. So actually the autocratic nations can today claim to have greater economic resources as well as, you could say, greater demographic resources, or like a population that is comparable to the democratic world. This is a point that is, they are justified to be represented on the high tables, on the global high tables like the United Nations Security Council, where both Russia and China are represented, but India is not represented in the UNSC as far as the permanent membership of UNSC is concerned. While a conflict between democracy and autocracy is not inevitable, again, the point is we can maneuver around this potential conflict and we can prevent this conflict. There is certainly a competition. We should recognize, we should accept that there is a competition between the democracies and autocracies. And autocracies may not have won it, but they have shown potential of turning this competition to their side actually. And democracies must frame their response. So what should be the response of the democratic nations, of the democratic alliance? It should be presenting an alternative based on respect for sovereignty, non-interference, and transparency. The thing is, even today, the democratic alliance is slightly stronger than the autocratic alliance in economic power, or even in, you could say, comprehensive power, like its soft power and all those things. The democratic countries are more attractive to potential allies. But to attract potential allies, we should actually promise them that we won't like interfere in their affairs, as has been the case with the United States of America, which has been known for its quest of exporting democracies, as we would discuss later. Moreover, we should behave ourselves transparently. That is quite unlike China, which is well known for acting, you could say, under the sheets. Actually, it acts actually very suspiciously. With all its conduct is suspicious. For an example, it's debt trap diplomacy, as we would discuss. Institutional reforms to wide base representation in global fora like United Nations. You can understand how ironic it is that the world's most populous democracy, India, is not represented in United Nations Security Council, or for that matter, an entire continent like Africa or even South America are not represented on UNSC. Expediting decision making to deny autocracies preemptive opportunity. Again, you are probably aware that India's, you could say, infrastructural projects in its countries which it sees as potential allies, like in its neighborhood, are delayed by so many red tape, which are inevitable in a democracy. As the democracies have to respect the checks and balances, the decision making is inevitably delayed in democracies. But the autocracies have no such restrictions, and they generally, you could say, decide faster, and they generally even act faster. But this should change, and the democracies should speed up decision making. Collaborative effort to solve wicked problems like poverty, inequality, climate change, etc. The thing is, it's not just that we have to look at things from the geopolitical lens only. There are things, there are problems which are far more pressing even today. For example, problems like poverty, inequality in socio-economic as well as gender terms, or for that matter, the emergent problem of climate change, which threatens the entire earth, actually the entire biosphere. So these things actually require us to collaborate with each other. And the thing is, most of these problems affect a majority of the world population, and if we have to bring them to our side, we should focus on resolving these issues. These are called the wicked problems. And how it should be done? Through collaborative efforts. For example, through technology transfer, things like technology transfers and all those things. Then come strategic cooperation in areas like research and development. We are obviously pointing to military hardware and intelligence sharing. We should also keep the channels and door open. We should keep the you could say communication channel open with our potential adversaries, that is with autocratic countries too, and we should keep the door open if any member of the autocratic alliances, if a supposedly dictatorial regime were to you could say apply for the membership of the democratic alliance, we should keep the door open for these countries too. Elaborating on these points, unlike the chaotic or quixotic quest of exporting democracy to autocratic countries, as was the fashion of the United States of America, we must assure smaller nations that their sovereignty would be respected. Interference in domestic affairs should be discouraged. Unless taken in the spirit of humanitarian intervention, that too under sanction of United Nations of America. Some of you would probably remember that the United States had interfered in Iraq actually to you could say effectuate a regime change. They you could say they upstaged, they removed the regime of Saddam Hussein. But these things should stop actually, otherwise our potential allies, they would be you could say put off due to our interfering ways. We are giving the specific example of China's debt trap, which should be countered through transparency. China has been quite you could say opaque about the financing terms that it offers to its potential allies who join its initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative. Alternatives like IMEC, that is India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, these should be represented as counter to wide elephants under China's Belt and Road Initiatives. Actually, what has happened, many of the projects planned under China's Belt and Road Initiatives are not even to serve the you could say domestic you could say customers, the domestic citizens actually, the indigenous people actually, but they are meant to advance China's interests. And this results in these countries, for an example, are, as we were talking about, our renegade province Pakistan, which has piled up so much debt from China that today it's feared that someday China might hijack its you could say entire administration. So that is China's classic debt trap, sorry. And we should assure our potential allies that we would conduct ourselves transparently, unlike China, so these things would be avoided. Institutions like UN, WTO, IMF, etc., or World Bank, these must be reformed in true spirit of democratic representation to wide base membership to include India, Africa, the Middle East, most of which are Muslim countries, and South America, etc. So again, the point is democracy is essentially all about representation. Democracy entails giving representation to a wide swath of people, and in our case it is even universal suffrage. So again, taking this idea forward of representation, we must make the international forums like the United Nations, World Bank, WTO, IMF, and so on more representative. We should get more democratic countries like India, Brazil, Nigeria, and so on these fora. That would strengthen the bargaining power of the democracies. As we were talking about the delays associated with democratic decision making, democratic systems sometimes delay decisions. This gives autocracies a chance to preempt democracies. Ukraine quest to cautionary tale is Ukraine's quest to join NATO at least since 2008, which has been held up by, you could say, delaying tactics of European Union, and all of this has meant that Ukraine was left unguarded when it was facing a potential Russian aggression. There must be a renewed commitment to resolve wicked problems like poverty, socio-economic and gender inequality, and climate change. The democracies should learn to collaborate and not indulge in parochial, that is, quite selfish interests, as has held technology transfers. The thing is, many people are suggesting that the advanced economies, advanced democratic economies, for an example, United States and European Union, for that matter, these should actually allow more technology transfers at more liberal terms rather than insisting on IP protection, that is intellectual property protection. They should actually allow technology transfers to deal with problems like climate change or for renewable technologies and things like those. But due to their, you could say, selfish interest, these things have not materialized. They have often insisted on getting full payment for these technology transfers. And the suggestion we are making here that they should be more liberal about technology transfers. Strategic cooperation in areas as diverse as co-development of defense hardware, intelligence sharing, and protocols like LSA, that is logistics support agreement. We are giving examples of these two specific protocols. Those are LSA, that is logistics support agreement, and BECA, that is basic exchange and cooperation agreement on geospatial intelligence, which was signed between India and US. These should serve as template. They should be promoted. You have a small homework here. Please look up the 4 strategic cooperation agreements. 4 strategic co-op agreements signed between India and US. And the suggestion we are making here that these agreements should act as templates for further cooperation between other democracies as well, among the democracies as well actually. Then we are making this very important suggestion that we must keep the door open if supposedly non-democratic countries wanted to join the alliance of democracies. Again, this is a very, very subjective definition, which country is democratic or which one is autocratic. Generally, there is a very fine line which differentiates the democratic countries and autocratic countries. But anyway, recognizing this fine difference, we should be welcoming to even autocratic countries if they ever apply to join the alliance of democracies. That would strengthen the democratic alliance and that would weaken the autocracies. Then we should take this lesson from Cold War. We should also maintain channels with autocracies. They should de-escalate conflicts and reduce suspicion that often flames paranoia and may lead to, you could say, wider conflicts like wars. So we should keep this channel of communication open with our potential adversaries, that is the autocratic countries too. To recapitulate the points we are suggesting here, that the democracies should present an alternative to the world that is based on, you could say, respect for sovereignty, non-interference, moreover that is much more transparent than the ways that the autocracies deal in. The democracies should be more open about collaboration, cooperation, for example technology transfers and all those things. They should call for reform of the of the international institutions, so that the representation at those institutions would include more democratic countries. Moreover, as last point, we are often arguing for keeping the doors open for potential allies, and moreover keeping the channel of communication open with the autocratic countries too. So this was all on the formidable challenge that is posed by the rise of autocratic countries to the democratic alliance, to the democratic nations, and moreover the suggestions that we would make to the democratic countries, how they should frame their response to this challenge of ascendant autocracies. This is how we sum up our answer for today. We would bring you another lecture in a few days. As usual, we wish you all the best. Thank you.